So as global residents of this entire world, it is incumbent upon all of us to recognize the global population shift that is happening is not going to end because someone is sending buses irresponsibly throughout the entire country. It's going to require Congress to organize, to come together, to do its part. We need the federal government to invest, but we also need to make sure that the governor of Texas does not take his animosity on the rest of the country.
We now have a hiring freeze that we cannot bring on additional employees to deal with everything from social services to actually cleaning our city. And that is what the breaking point looks like, what we are experiencing right now.
Anti-immigrant, illegal, call ICE, send them all back, waiting across the Rio Grande and don't obey our immigration and naturalization law. Trump, come in here, clean this mess up. The most corrupt city in the United States is the city of Chicago, and that's not my...
Thank you, Mr. Blakemore, for your comments.
So there you go. Just some of the back and forth over the debate on immigration with Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, New York City Mayor Eric Adams, and a resident of Chicago raising concern about the ongoing migrant crisis, saying that they just need to be sent back. Bishop on air, back at it, and some of the developments over the past 24 hours on the issue of non-citizen migrants to the state of Illinois. You had New York Mayor Eric Adams join the mayor of Chicago and the mayor of Denver. And they discussed a variety of things when it comes to their ask of the federal government concerning the ongoing migrant influx. And here's a hint. They're not asking for the border to be closed. They're asking for more federal resources. Here's the New York mayor.
We cannot allow buses with people needing our help to arrive without warning at any hour of day and night. This not only prevents us from providing assistance in an orderly way, it puts those who have already suffered so much in danger. To be clear, this is not stopping people from coming, but about ensuring the safety of migrants and making sure they can arrive in a coordinated and orderly way. Chicago Mayor Johnson has already taken similar actions to coordinate orderly bus arrivals, and I'm glad our teams have been able to share lessons learned from where and what they are doing.
So Adams essentially is saying that they're going to mimic in New York what Chicago's done by allowing for the impoundment of buses that don't follow certain protocol, especially when it comes to non-citizen migrants being delivered. So you heard him, it's not them saying they're not going to be welcoming. So, I mean, nothing there about the federal government shutting down the border, but he did have an ask saying that the federal government needs to provide more resources.
But we need the state and federal government's help in resettling and supporting the 68,000 migrants still in our care, as well as those who are on their way and those yet to come.
So again, asking for more resources. He has stats on how many migrants are in New York.
And we've helped submit more than 23,000 work authorizations, TPS, and asylum applications. But we cannot continue to do the federal government's job. We have spoken to FEMA and other federal officials who have expressed concern about the border's surge, but not offered additional help. We need action, and we need it now.
So what that action is more resources, they say. Didn't really hear much from this joint news conference that they held between New York, Chicago, and Denver on closing down the border. But Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson talked about the steps they've taken in Chicago and some of the ramifications that they've seen because of their steps in Chicago.
As buses continue to arrive in the city of Chicago and all over the country, the type of chaos that has been administered has left many of our local economies under a tremendous amount of duress. Road buses arriving not just in the city of Chicago, but surrounding communities as well. Some neighborhoods as far reaching as an hour and a half outside of the city of Chicago. Buses sent by the governor of Texas, literally dropping families off in the middle of nowhere.
So
These
Johnson
families have experienced a great.
Johnson talking about the ongoing issue of these buses and the impact it's having on Chicago. He provided some stats yesterday during this news conference.
And over the past 7 months, we've received hundreds of buses, some in the middle of the night, and again, some in the outskirts of the city of Chicago, with little to no coordination. I've stood up 27 shelters. We are housing currently nearly 15,000 asylum seekers, providing mental care, health care, educating 4,500 students, while also creating a pathway to sustainability. But we cannot do this alone. We need more support from the federal government.
So again, he's asking for more funds and support from the federal government, and talked about what could be a possible breaking point in all of this.
Have reached a point where we are either close to capacity or nearly out of room. Without significant intervention from the federal government, this mission will not be sustained. But make no mistake about it, the road buses and now chartered flights is not only unsafe, but it's inhumane. So we are calling on not just the federal government to provide support and resources to address this humanitarian crisis. We also need better coordination at the border. The state of Texas has a responsibility to connect with municipalities around the country to help address and to deal with this crisis.
So he's talking about just having more coordination with the border. Again, not explicitly saying that the border needs to be shut down. Denver's mayor, he also talked about the impact that city's having. Mayor Mike Johnston saying that indeed they've got issues they're dealing with the migrant influx.
We at this point now have had more migrant arrivals to our city than any city in America per capita. And that is not because there is a thoughtful or coordinated strategy to entry. It is because we are the first big city north of El Paso and the cheapest bus ticket and the shortest trip for the governor and others who are trying to find a place to send people. And
also a sanctuary city. But the Denver city officials dealing with more migrants than what Chicago's dealing with.
We've now received more than 35,000 migrants over the course of the last year. We have more than 4,000 that are in shelter tonight. That's more than 10 times the number that were there when I took office just 6 months ago. And we have incredibly been successful in integrating almost all of those migrants into the city. But as both mayors have mentioned, we know this is not the right strategy by which to help make newcomers be successful or help make our city successful. And so I just want to join Mayor Adams and Mayor Johnson in saying I think there are 3 very clear steps the federal government can take today that we want to see them take. One of those is we do need to dramatically increase work authorization for those folks who are arriving in our cities. Many people come to this country, they get paroled into the country with an asylum claim, but they'll come to Denver and they'll have a court date for that asylum claim that is April 23rd of 2027. That's 4 years away, and in the meantime, don't have capacity to work or to work fast enough. And so what we're asking for is that folks that are arriving and are paroled in come with work authorization so we can help them do what they want to do, which is support themselves and support their families. The second is we need more federal support to be able to manage this amount of inflow. It will crush city budgets around the country. As we know, we're looking at about $160 million of potential costs going into next year's budget. That's almost 10% of our entire city budget. That's a massive impact for us. And the third is we think if we have federal resources and we have work authorization, we also ought to be able to have a coordinated entry plan by which the country as a whole sets a strategy for where newcomers arrive and where they can be welcomed in a way that we know cities can successfully support.
So what, like an Ellis Island of sorts? Is that what they're looking for? Or in that 3 different asks that the mayor there from Colorado had, none of it was clamp down, no more entries, remain in Mexico, those types of things. Because, listen, Johnson, he's talking about how, this new wave of incoming migrants, obviously a reality on the streets of these 3 major cities. But he says it's just a new phase of global migration. Others would say that it's the policies of Joe Biden that has open border policies that's leading to this influx. But the mayor of Chicago responded to the governor of Texas, who, if you recall, bus after bus after bus comes. A few weeks ago, the city of Chicago started an impounding program for buses that aren't following certain protocol. And then the governor of Texas chartered a private flight to Chicago. Now we see that the governor of Texas is having buses drop people off outside of the city of Chicago. And that's something that's being impactful on communities all around the Chicago suburbs. But one thing that the governor of Texas has said is that this is because of the city's sanctuary policies. Governor Greg Abbott pushing back on the governor or on the Chicago mayor about the people who are, being sent. In a response, Governor Abbott's press secretary said Mayor Johnson is flat out lying. He says that if he truly cared about these migrants, he would stop spreading falsehoods and complaining about a few thousand migrants being being bussed into his sanctuary city. Instead, Mayor Johnson could call on President Biden to take immediate action to secure the border, something the president continues to fail to do. So Johnson instead reacts and essentially chastises the governor of Texas for essentially saying, hey, if you're a sanctuary city, we're going to send these migrants crossing the border because of open border policies from the Biden administration, and you should be welcoming those individuals to your sanctuary city. Here's Mayor Johnson.
Unfortunately, what the governor of Texas has done is that he has seen our desire to come up with a coordinated effort, and he has been provocated to retaliate against us establishing structure and calm. Sending planes to Chicago or anywhere else that are funded by the government of Texas, these private planes without a manifest, without knowing who's on the plane, without knowing what's on the plane, is not just reckless, it's dangerous.
Others would say that it's reckless and dangerous to have an open border. And I think that's something that, Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, has tried to highlight. And you got to think also about the flood of undocumented or non-citizens or those claiming asylum into these smaller communities along the border. Eagle Pass, El Paso. I mean, these are areas where they're smaller communities and they're getting hit with tens of thousands of individuals a day in some instances. But it's a burden on Chicago. Chicago Mayor Johnson yesterday during that news conference talked about how there's soon to be no more room in the inn. And you've got the mayor of Chicago talking about steps he's taking to get other cities outside of Chicago involved.
Last Friday, I convened about 80 mayors from surrounding villages and towns around the city of Chicago, because as a result of our ordinance, and this is something that Mayor Johnston and Mayor Adams have a preview to, is that as a result of our ordinance, the governor of Texas, looking to circumvent law, has sent buses to surrounding villages, towns, and cities. It's created a very chaotic situation. Many of you are aware, there's a town, Peatone, Illinois, well outside of the city of Chicago. The bus driver dropped off these families and told them they were in Chicago, and they were literally dropped off on the side of the road.
So the mayor saying this is starting to impact other cities. And we've seen the headlines. We've seen other communities address this to a degree, including last night, where you've got the town of Elburn Village. Their board voted unanimously last night to essentially ban unscheduled migrant bus drop-offs. ABC 7 reporting on this. We'll just take a look at this briefly. Two suburbs voted in favor of new legislation designed to stop buses from dropping off migrants without notice. The Elburn Village Board voted unanimously Wednesday night. You've also got the Elburn ordinance, like others, essentially saying that they are no longer going to accept these buses unnoticed. And Elburn Village administrators saying there will be a 15-day waiting period before the measure goes into effect. But that's not the only place. You've got others as well. Chicago Ridge voting on a similar measure. Rosemont and Aurora enacting ordinances. But even in last month, you had the village of Homer Township that made their own resolution. And this is Homer Township official Mike Bonomo reading a resolution from last month that they ended up passing.
A resolution establishing policy for immigration law and the enforcement of such laws with regards to safety and security for the residents of Homer Township. Whereas we believe in the rule of law, including immigration law, and whereas refusing to enforce immigration law jeopardizes the safety of and imposes financial burdens on our residents, and further is unfair to those seeking legal entry into America. And whereas refusing to enforce immigration laws is empowering drug cartels and victimizing women and children, many of whom have been exploited or killed while journeying to America. And whereas the federal government admitted it does not know the location or in whose care, if anyone's are some 85,000 unaccompanied minors granted entrance into America. And whereas the federal government admitted it does not know the location of several individuals on its terrorist watch list granted entrance into America. And whereas many of the migrants who've been allowed to enter America have not filed asylum applications and therefore have no moral rights to be here. And whereas persons seeking entrance into America are not American citizens or legal residents and therefore are not entitled to the same benefits. And whereas Homer Township has limited taxpayer resources, we are obligated to use in the services of those individuals, our lawful constituents. And now therefore, be it resolved, Homer Township will not accept nor provide taxpayer-funded services to migrants, and we shall return any individuals sent our way by elected officials from sanctuary states or cities to them, so that they may live their values just as we live ours, the difference being ours are consistent with the rule of law.
So again, it's a different type of ordinance that's being passed in Homer Township than what some of these other places like Elburn and the others, Rosemont, I think, that have ordinances about buses. So Homer Township saying, we're just not going to do this with our tax dollars. We're not even going to accept grants from the state if they say, hey, here's grant money if you take in these migrants. So different approaches, it seems. And I talked with Effingham County Board Vice Chairman David Campbell yesterday and got his perspective. And listen, he says they're looking at this issue as well.
We're trying to stay on top of this, Greg, and we've been watching this as it progresses. We have actually been working on a resolution, and it even may become an ordinance if we have to go, and put some teeth into it.
And he says, listen, they're open to non-citizens becoming citizens in the legal process, naturalization and such. They're open to that type of thing.
We're open arms for those type of people, but trying to push illegal immigrants into any county in Illinois, in Effingham County is one that I represent. We just don't want to see our taxpayers have to burden any of the medical or any of the other expenses that go along with housing or anything else. They shouldn't have to burden that type of thing with these folks coming in. They should have had a plan in place if they were wanting to bring them in. They didn't. I mean, that's quite obvious. Another issue is, if they come in and start taking up some of the jobs in the area that are available, that our local citizens won't have access to those jobs. Just not a good situation, and we're going to try to tackle it, with the resolution first. Just basically saying that we want them to come in legally. We're not going to allow any vagrants or any type of trying to get housing together for these people, tents or even solid structures. We're going to be watching that, and we're going to try to tackle it head on.
So clearly a lot of different ideas there as Effingham County works on their resolution. But they're in central Illinois. We have seen reports that there are signs along I-55 in some exits, some mile markers that say no migrant buses welcome this exit. And that's been reported from various areas throughout the state. So you've got that as well at play here. But with ordinances that are being passed in Elburn Village, for instance, about, busing in particular. You've got others like Homer Township and Effingham County looking at just saying, no, we're not going to accept this thing, period. But what should others do? David Campbell has a suggestion there.
I heard of that incident. I think it was up around Kankakee, just was the latest one I heard about. I think they're going to have to get with their legislators up in that area, state's attorneys and county boards, and their state legislators, and try to do the same thing. You know, we've got most of our local legislators on board. We talk to them, you know, while we're putting this together, state's attorney and whatnot, and all our other board members. So they're going to have to kind of do the same thing. They're going to have to tackle it head on and get it stopped before it starts. Unfortunately, some of those areas up there, it's already started, and they didn't get on top of it soon enough. But I don't think it's too late to address it. And you know, if they brought them in, they're going to have to figure out a way not to burden the taxpayers on this, bringing these illegals in, and find a way to bring them in legally if they want to come in legally and stay and be a part of the United States and go through the process of becoming a legal citizen and not on the taxpayers' dime.
Again, it's David Campbell, the vice chairman of the Effingham County Board. In the state, it's a sanctuary state. It's not just Chicago and various other municipalities across the state that say they're a welcoming state who've passed similar ordinances saying, hey, we're not going to enforce immigration law. You're welcome here. But the state itself is a sanctuary state. Campbell says that needs to change.
Current administration, I don't see that happening, but we, again, do not, as far as Downstate Illinois, we do not see that as a constitutional move. They're taking grabs at, trying to take these grabs on and turning these laws around and making them legal where they're not truly constitutional laws.
So again, David Campbell there from the Effingham County Board about possible action they're going to take. But back to the three mayors of the major cities in New York, Chicago, and Colorado. The Colorado mayor from Denver, Mayor Mike Johnston, says they're at their breaking points.
I think cities would have to look at dramatically reducing the amount of services we offered or dramatically cutting our city budgets, which has impacts on other parts of city services. And so those are the hard scenarios that we know our city would face, other cities would face. But we think there's a common sense path to avoid that, which is why we're pushing the Congress and the White House for action on these topics to make sure we avoid that.
But again, they're asking for more funds, not necessarily for the border to be shut down. Mayor Eric Adams talked about how the city's being impacted there. They're not able to, do proper cleaning. They're asking for 5% cuts across all city agencies in New York. They're definitely at a breaking point, he says.
We now have a hiring freeze that we cannot bring on additional employees to deal with everything from social services to actually cleaning our city. We're seeing them walking the street, knocking on doors, asking those who live in the community for different items and different things. We're seeing the erosion of the quality of life that we've improved on in such a short period of time of this administration. And we have been impacted. For many months, we were able to keep the visualization of this crisis from hitting our streets, but we have reached a breaking point. We're no longer able to do that because of the volume in numbers. Just last week. Yeah,
so the numbers continue with buses being sent to New York, to Denver, to Chicago. Here's Mayor Brandon Johnson. Again, not blaming the open border for the continued influx of non-citizens.
Also, as global residents of this entire world, it is incumbent upon all of us to recognize the global population shift that is happening is not going to end because someone is sending buses irresponsibly throughout the entire country. It's going to require Congress to organize, to come together, to do its part. We need the federal government to invest, but we also need to make sure that the governor of Texas does not take his animosity on the rest of the country.
So there you go. Some of the latest debate back and forth about non-citizen migrants coming to the state of Illinois from the southern U.S. border and what the major cities are asking for. They're asking for more federal funds, not necessarily for the border to be shut down, while others are saying the border needs to be shut down. All right, so there you go. That's just some of the latest. Again, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Each and every weekday morning, we wake up and give you some of the latest here. As I broadcast from my home, I did terrestrial radio for years, but I figured, you know what, with a growing online audience, might as well just work smarter, not harder. So you can help me do that by supporting the program, grab some merchandise, tell your friends, share it up on social media, and tune in each and every weekday morning here with Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. But subscribe on YouTube so you can get all the clips. All right, stay tuned.